Hi, welcome to On Point, the podcast where we explore ideas, leaders, and innovations shaping the future of medical affairs. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that's become essential for high performing medical affairs organizations. We're going to talk about medical excellence. As medical affairs continues to grow in impact, so does the need for us to really define how we operate, how we enable teams, and how we measure success. And, just to be clear, medical operations remains foundational. It ensures that the machine runs well, but today we're going to focus on a specific part of this called medical excellence. And it's really beginning to drive broader strategy, cultural alignment, and the long-term performance of the organization. And to help us make sense of this shift, we are being joined today by two outstanding guests who bring decades of experience and leadership in building these functions. The first is no stranger to the podcast. He's been with us before. We have Michael Kahn, head of medical affairs operations at Spark Therapeutics. He's got over 25 years, am I allowed to say that, Michael? Of experience across biotech and pharma. You couldn't tell by looking at him. Michael has led everything from medical communications and publications to building operations teams from scratch. He's a natural chief of staff and a business educator for medical affairs. He brings clarity, structure, and strategy to very complex environments, and he's just known for aligning teams, unlocking capacity, and really being able to help scale the organization. So glad to have you here, Michael. It's going to be fantastic to talk to you again. With him, we have our first-time guest, super excited, Chris McNabb. He's the Director of Medical Excellence at Bayer. And Chris has walked the path. So he started in the front line and is now designing the systems, processes, and teams that support medical excellence across the globe. And today he's focusing on building frameworks that allow field teams to really operate at their best. He's helping to align the work that we're doing every day with strategy and really helping to scale. And he has earned industry-wide recognition for leadership, team building, and performance. Chris, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Great to be here, Scott.
And just because we always have to say this, you guys, I'm so glad you're going to be able to share all of your experience. I know that what we talk about today is based on your personal experience and not necessarily representative of the organizations that you work for currently. But I do appreciate them and you for coming and sharing your knowledge with the broader medical affairs community. Welcome to On Point, the Medical Excellence podcast, where we talk to pharma leaders about how to build highly effective medical affairs organizations. So let's jump in, because today we are going to explore themes like vision, scope, even how to brand medical excellence, and really explore this line between medical operations, medical excellence, and the power of both. So let's just jump right in. And maybe to get started, let's just kind of talk about like what's happening, because medical excellence is somewhat of a new topic, or a new term at least. It's only been, if I look at MAPS and Fierce Pharma and all the conferences that are out there, it's only been in the last few years that it's kind of popped up as something unique from operations. So, love to start. Chris, you want to tell us just kind of like, how do you define medical excellence? What is it?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting question, right? Because like you said, it started to get a little bit more attention, and I think we've got to have an answer to that question. At Bayer, we recently revitalized a medical excellence program. We had one in the past, and we wanted to recreate it. And we realized that we needed an answer to this question. And so we did actually find acceleration points definition of medical excellence while we were poking around and just looking at how others were viewing it. And we actually adapted acceleration points view to our own use case. And so we defined it as wanting to focus on the role of field medical, the field's impact and their collaborations around the company, best practices, systems and tools, skill development, and recognition and leadership. And those were the things that we really wanted to focus on, or at least the big buckets. But I will say too that I'm not sure that there is one single definition. In talking to Michael recently, we've realized that there are definite differences from company to company. So if you are building a new program or you're wanting to optimize your current program, I would suggest having a clear definition,
Mm.
making it unique to your specific company, and also putting specific guardrails around that too, because otherwise you may get dragged into absolutely everything. You may not want that, right? So
Ye-
I don't know, Michael, do you have an opinion on this one?
Oh, sure do. And I agree. I think there is no centralized single definition of medical affairs excellence. I think back 5, 10 years ago, the departments, the job descriptions I was seeing were medical affairs operations, medical affairs systems, process and knowledge management. Now we're seeing excellence. I've also seen medical operations services. I think you could orchestrate an enormous Venn diagram about where the overlap is and where the standalone areas are. And that may be useful for an individual company or organization who's looking to build it out. I think that absolutely makes sense. We'll talk about scope, I'm sure, and identifying the pain points. But when I think about the definition of medical affairs excellence, in my mind, it derives from the concept of operational excellence, a little bit of a manufacturing term, a little bit of process excellence, lean, Six Sigma. But I think about process optimization. I think about identifying value from the perspective of the consumer, the customer, or often in medical affairs case, the stakeholder. So I think about operational excellence in that regard. And from there, I think it's really important to individually define
Mm.
medical affairs excellence in an organization specific way. What does it mean in your particular context? Because I do think it's going to vary.
Absolutely. And it's great because the two of you are currently in two very different organizations in size and life
Right.
cycle and resources. And so I'm sure we'll get to explore that. One of the things that is kind of consistent between both of your explanations is that medical excellence isn't the machine, right? Medical affairs is. We are the machine that builds the machine. And so, sometimes when we uh, pull responsibility for how we do processes or how we teach our teams off of the people who do it every day, that can be challenging. So, why do you think teams are going through that? Like, why pull some of that work around learning and process and off of the people who do it every day to a specialized group that's going to build the machine?
For me, I think it's about demand. I think when the demands of whether it's an individual MSL or a medical information leader or a medical communications leader, where the volume of work to keep up becomes so much that thinking about how the work gets done
Mm.
um, becomes something that can't be redesigned easily. And I'm reminded of a cartoon about somebody pushing a square up a hill, a box up a hill, and they're handed a wheel, and they say, "I'm sorry, I don't have time to redefine how my work is done right now."
Mm.
Uh, and I think there's an analogy there. So this, simply put, the demand on individual contributors to meet their deliverables is
Yeah.
driving the need for excellence teams.
Wonderful. Chris, what do you see?
Yeah, I think Michael's exactly right. I love what you guys have said with the analogy of pushing a square up a hill and then us being the machine that builds the machine, because you're so right about those. So, uh, Michael's at a small organization. I'm at a large organization. And one of the things that we definitely wanted to do was to help standardize and align. There's a huge need for medical affairs generally right now to be optimized and to be working at their absolute best. So, in order for us to do that, we have fairly large teams as far as pharma organizations go. Not the largest in the industry, but certainly some big ones, a good chunk of people. And if everybody's operating differently, then we may not be optimized, right? And in places where standardization does make sense, where
Mm.
alignment does make sense, that's where we can step in and help out, because we have that bird's eye view that nobody else in the organization has. And so that's where we can create resources that everybody is using or provide best practices that inform all of the teams.
Members of your team and I went down this road significantly at a workshop at MAPS talking about standardization of processes across different teams, often different therapeutic areas. And you make a really important point, and that's standardization, where it's needed. And sometimes it's needed and sometimes it's not. And I think looking at the needs of individual therapeutic area teams is really critical because they may be structured differently, different points in the life cycle. They have different needs. Maybe they have different business problems entirely. And I know early on at Spark, I used to say, when you've seen one therapeutic area, you've seen one therapeutic area. And so, it was inefficient, but we encouraged even and documented different processes for the same type of tasks across different teams because that delivered the most value ultimately to the end stakeholders.
One of the things that strikes me about this part of the conversation is sometimes people think that you have to, as medical excellence, have all the answers, when often the answer is already in the organization, just nobody knows about it. Right? And so if you can go and say, wow, you guys are doing something a lot better than other people, let's like tell people about that. You can make a lot of leeway there. And that's driving that consistency.
So, Scott, that's a really good point because we often found that anytime we decided, okay, this is a topic we really want to take on as a medical excellence team, our first step was often to just look around and see who had already been working on that and to pick things up where we already were. Because you're right, some of those resources did already exist.
And in our small environment, when we launched operations 5 years ago, we knew nobody else was working on it. These were things that were being undone, not done rather. And so just simply trying to add another piece to the puzzle to either deliver something that hadn't been delivered before or deliver it better.
Got it. So let's talk about that because it may be the single hardest part of being in medical excellence or operations, which is when we say we're going to do something that hasn't been done, or we're going to do something better, or we're going to ask for consistency, or we're going to raise the bar. Like, how do you get people to actually want to do that, right? Because it seems as though if they already had that vision, they might have already been working toward it. And so we're going to bring this new vision to them. What does it take to create something compelling enough to earn the alignment and the engagement of small or large organizations?
I guess I would say that's a challenge of every medical excellence program because sometimes they are perceived as being off to the side, detached, uninformed. And so it is up to us to cultivate that buy-in and to help folks operate at their best. But to your point about the fact that these organizations are humming along just fine usually before we come along, sometimes it's just about helping them continue to do the things that they're already doing or doing the things that they're already doing just that little bit better. And sometimes it's even just about capturing what they're doing so that you can communicate that to the rest of the organization, because maybe the full impact and scope of what they're doing isn't being recognized or captured in a smart way.
Sure. What do you see, Michael?
I think two critical steps here. Number one is taking the time to interview key stakeholders and leadership and find out what their pain points are. I mean, their legitimate pain points, like what's really driving them nuts. Contracts take 6 months. Something else takes a long time. Quality is an issue. Whatever that issue, really drill down, get to the root cause, and that requires building authentic relationships first. Second step is going back and having the imagination and the creativity to envision a world in which there's a solution for that pain point. You can go back to a stakeholder and say, imagine a world where blank, right? They didn't have to deal with that pain point, or that pain point was ameliorated somehow. There was a tool, or there was a process, there was a person. You're making somebody's life easier. That's the what's in it for them. And I think, that's a very powerful way to get buy-in, is to show them, we hear you, we feel your pain, but more than that, we can help with that. That, in my experience, leads to a focused scope of operations excellence, rather than, as we talked about before, like trying to do everything, nothing quite sticks. But then again,
Hmm.
you're not really making anybody's life easier. For me, that's what it's all about, is removing obstacles and enabling other teams to do their best work.
Yeah. Something that strikes me is that in most organizations, and I know a little bit about both of your organizations, people get recognized for the invention, for the new, for doing something different than everybody else. People don't often get recognized for execution and implementation and consistency. And so it's kind of inspiring to people to build their own visions that may or may not align with the one that you're trying to work on centrally for the organization. What do you do when you bump into other people building a vision that might not be aligned?
Do you have a thought on this one, Michael?
I think if so, I don't think it's common that other stakeholders, whether within or external to medical, is likely to build a capability that directly contradicts the vision, maybe complementary, and then there's the potential for a turf battle. Ultimately, in that situation, both organizations presumably are acting in the best interest of the organization. And so then you end up in a situation where it becomes a little bit potentially of just an empire building power grab, but ultimately whoever wins that is going to benefit the organization. Scott, you talked earlier, just a minute earlier, about the recognition. I would say to anybody aspiring to get into medical excellence or to start medical excellence, if it is public credit and adulation you're looking for, look elsewhere. We are often the people behind the curtain, as I said, enabling others to do their best work. I love that. I like, being a guru to some, a really trusted number two to some, and I don't need that credit,
Hmm.
which is why I've fit well in this role. And from what I've seen of other colleagues that I've networked with, they feel the same way. If you're looking to build something for the sake of building something, I would ask you to really look at your motives, because they should be bigger than that.
Love that. Chris, what do you see in
So,
a complex organization like Bayer?
yeah, so something that sticks in my mind, this was years and years ago in my first couple of years as an MSL. I once heard a sales leader say, you can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't have a plan to implement it, it's not worth anything. And that has always stuck with me. And it's very true in medical excellence too. I actually see a lot of potential turf wars. Luckily, none of them have uh, been an issue. Um, but you do have to cultivate a culture where everybody understands that the best idea wins at the end of the day. And pretty much everything that our team has touched, somebody else has had some sort of hand in it at some point. And so there's a stake in it. They're attached to it. They like their idea and they want to push their idea forward. And sometimes it's our role to help marshal it forward. And we see roadblocks where maybe they don't, or we see implementation challenges where they don't. And so that's where we can help make their vision a reality. And so that's the role that we've sort of played.
One of the key tenets of process improvement from a lean perspective, for example, is a good idea can come from anywhere. It can come from the lowest level of the organization. If you're running a hospital, it can come from the cleaning crew if they see something. It can come from a patient. In a pharma or biotech or device industry, it can come from anywhere. And it's important to evaluate the idea if it doesn't come from you. And not react emotionally. Just because it's not yours doesn't mean it's not worth implementing. And maybe you can add something, as Chris said, to that implementation. If everybody adds something to it, you end up with something better in the long run, and then everybody has a stake in it.
Love that.
No
Um,
doubt.
I think that it can be really easy to recognize when we don't have alignment with leadership across the organization, because it looks like, somebody standing on stage and going, "Hey, everybody, want to introduce you to Michael, want to introduce you to Chris. They're going to tell us what you have to do." Right. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, we've been working on this together for months. Right. What does it
Exactly.
look like when you have alignment and engagement from the leaders?
Well, first of all, we're all laughing because we all recognize that You should never say that on stage because that's not how you should be running the project from the
Right.
beginning in the first place. You should be working across TA to have leadership all aligned on certain things. And, sometimes things get misaligned and you have to course correct. And that's just the nature of business and work in groups. But if you're doing the right things on the front end, where everybody's at the table, everybody has been offered a seat, and you've come to a consensus, whether everybody is fully enthusiastic about the compromises that you had to
Mm,
make, that's probably not going to be the case. Somebody might want this particular project to be done a slightly different way, and that's fine. But as long as everybody's come to a consensus and a compromise and agreed, this is what we're doing, this is what we're moving forward with, then no matter who's up there on stage talking about the next steps, everybody should be speaking with one voice, and there should really be a united front in the rollout, ideally.
love that.
Yeah, the to the question of somebody getting on stage and saying, Michael's going to tell us how to do that. And here's my word for word response to this. I've said this many times. Um, Operations excellence, we're not the compliance partner of the department. As a matter of fact, in some cases, often we will publicly advocate for medical um, across the table from compliance
Mm,
because we see a better way to do something. So we're not there to tell you how you have to do it. We're here to partner with you to do it the best way possible and to deliver ultimately against strategic objectives that have already been written down. Right. So, we're not compliance. Let's find a faster, better way to do this, and let's figure out, the argument for compliance when we take it to them. You do that often enough in working meetings,
hmm
and you'll probably never, you hopefully won't get that stage moment. So that's my response to that. The question, how do you know if you don't have alignment? In my experience, fortunately, this has only happened a few times. You see projects run by other functions. Maybe it's a organization-wide competition for something, and they didn't even reach out to your group. It's like they delivered something, or maybe they're experimenting with AI, or they're finding a better way to do something. They didn't reach out to operations. Now, that group, that function may have done something freaking awesome. And that's the time to pack up your ego and reach out and say, this is awesome. My team or I myself have a real interest and we've been working with this. Can we take this to the next step? Right. And you didn't have alignment, but that doesn't mean you can't build it from there on out.
Yeah. Both of you pointed out some really important things around recognizing that, this is not the first time people have been thinking about this, recognizing contribution, recognizing where people are and helping take the next step. And I think the other way I would help summarize those points is sometimes we have to let leaders lead. Like we can't take away the leadership. We can help them, we can provide them the language or the words or the process, but it's not our team, right?
There have been a couple of times where I hopped into a work stream in the middle of the work stream, and I offered another alternative, another way to do a project that I felt was efficient and that I had done in the past. And the group said, we don't want to do it that way. And there may be good reasons for that you're not aware of. So like Michael said, you got to check your ego and say, hey, maybe they may know what's best here. And if you've presented an option to them and it's not crucial that we align on it, then let it be.
So
Let
let's
leaders lead. I love that, and I'm going to steal that. But it also brings me to another tool in the traditional operational excellence tool set, which is an after action review. And I won't go into the details around that. But in my experience, when I have seen, fortunately, occasions are few, but when I've seen projects go off the rails, despite my offer, like Chris, I've offered another way to do this, it wasn't taken, and the project really did encounter difficulties. If there's the leverage, the ability to do an after action review, kind of a post-mortem on it, you might get that post project realization
Right.
through an AAR, an after action review. And that's one more way of demonstrating the value. Not saying I told you so, right?
Of
And
course.
you never go down that road, of course, but to be able to present alternative approaches for the next project that comes in. Maybe in the future, we ran into this problem, we could do it this way, and then you've documented it. Military does that all the time.
So let's talk a little bit about, you both have mentioned through this conversation the importance of declaring and understanding the scope of what medical excellence is going to do, because again, you could be pulled into anything and everything. How do you prioritize? How do you decide here are the things that are worth putting this team's effort against?
I think that's a great question. And Spark's needs and structure and Bayer's needs and structure are very different. And so this is going to lead to a really good conversation here, I know. In our case, in Spark's case, this is 5+ years ago, 7+ years ago, actually. The need was very clear. We needed two things. We needed medical legal review, consistency, expectations, and organization metrics, organization. We also needed effective project management to support primarily our medical directors in conducting their strategic activities. I had a vision beyond that, but I didn't have the resources for it. But that's how I built it intentionally, one step at a time. And now we're doing insights for field medical, we're doing AI, and all the other interesting things, and we've expanded our scope, but it starts with the pain points. And fortunately, I had those pain points clearly impressed on me as I took the role. Not everybody has the luxury, seriously, of having those expectations clearly set. I did, and it wasn't in the form of criticism. But if I had gone off and said, okay, I hear this, but I really want to do this, that would not have worked well. Bayer's case is, and their business challenges are entirely different. Chris, I always like hearing you talk about this.
Yeah. So what we've done is, and first of all, I think this is a really important question. You've got to, as a medical excellence team, or even if it's just you, think about it. Think about what your priorities are and rank them. And so we, as a medical excellence team, would come to, it was one of the first things we did. We came together and we talked about what we saw, what we'd like to help with. And then we delegated leads for each of those work streams. And then we went to work and went to go execute on those things. The things that were at the top of the list were the really urgent deficits. Sometimes those were most often operational or training deficits that really needed to be plugged. And so we definitely went ahead and did that. But there were some other sort of bigger ticket, larger scope items that we knew were going to be a little bit more long-term as well. And we knew that we wanted in, say, 6 months. So we also started working on those immediately and knew that the deliverable was going to show up later. So every work stream had a little bit of a different flavor in that regard, but we definitely ranked our priorities. We thought about them carefully. We went after them, and we should be regularly rebalancing them. Admittedly, we could probably be rebalancing them more often, but that is something that I do think is important here.
Not just because of our own desires, but also for what people want. There's always this balance between I want AI and I want shiny new and I want the latest technology and I want like this brand new stuff. And then you look at these initiatives and you go, me too, I want that too. But we're not even documenting interactions, right? And we don't even
Right.
like we're not doing basics. And so if we don't do that, these things won't work. How do you like balance kind of the new shiny exciting stuff with the fact that we also have some foundational things like Michael you were talking about when you first got there that just had to get done or else those things won't work? How do you balance that for your teams?
I think Michael and I are pretty much on the same page here. I mean, cool is great. It means that you've got enthusiasm for a project, and that will help motivate you to get it done. But we have to recognize that just because it's cool doesn't mean that it necessarily rockets to the top of the priority list, right? There may be some self-restraint that's needed there. And I think if it does advance your goals in some sort of way, then that's what really ought to make it at the top of the list. But I don't know, Michael, additional thoughts?
That last sentence is the one that absolutely resonates. If it doesn't advance your goals, keep the tool in mind, but keep it in the toolbox and don't spend a lot of money on it. If you're trying to build a house and you're at the stage where you're laying in plumbing pipe, don't spend your money and your time figuring out what the best carpentry level is. I'm clearly not a home improvement guy. I just made that obvious, but focus on the tools that will help you achieve your strategic objectives. If you keep the end in mind, the middle often sorts itself out.
I have a business coach who says it like this. He says, sometimes you need broccoli, not just chocolate. And but if you know you're going to get the chocolate later, then it helps you eat the broccoli. And so, I think that one of the things that's kind of neat about the roles we get to play is that we see the connection between meaningful basic data and using it later in something else. Or, hey, you know what? If we don't know the goals of our engagement, I can't program a computer to help you achieve those. So, like, we have to get this done first. That's the goal. The tool might help us get there, but if we're not clear on what this is, I mean, if you can't explain it to a human, you can't explain it to a computer.
Yeah, 100%. And so going back to the broccoli chocolate analogy, it makes me think about ensuring that if you're going to ask somebody to change their ways of working, that there's a psychological reward at the end of the journey. And if you're talking about a very shiny tool, and we're all talking about AI right now, in a couple of years, it'll be something else. That's fine. It's always something else. The psychological reward is being on the cutting edge, for some people at least, and really learning and diving in and using the shiny new tool. If the organization, however, is incentivized such that the psychological or financial or professional award is linked to the goals, right? Then doing whatever you need to do to accomplish the goals of the org will have its own psychological reward. So in some sense, it's a traditional business problem sometimes of making sure that incentivization, that you're incentivizing the right things, right? And focusing people on what the objective is and not necessarily the next shiny thing, which comes with its own chocolate, if you will.
That's right. So, I think the other thing that is interesting to debate sometimes is we don't have to do the same level of work for every single initiative that we want to roll out, right? Sometimes it might be, hey guys, here's the playbook of how you guys can go do something better. Sometimes we might teach people to go do, and sometimes we might take work off their plates and set up a support team that's going to facilitate material review or take care of HCP contracts or do the analysis, right? But we have to take work from people sometimes to help them. How do you think about, or how do you have a framework for making a decision on whether you're going to say, here's how it should be done, teach them how to do it, versus taking work off the plate and doing it for them?
Big question. So situational leadership comes to mind in the sense that some people are very confident and competent with certain tasks, and you should let those people be and give them a decent amount of autonomy. There are other folks who are newer who may not have done something before, and they're not sure of themselves and their own abilities there. And those are the folks that you need to provide a little bit more hands-on help, right? I think that in general, frameworks I feel like are great for processes, but I also really love teaching people to fish when it comes to finding information, especially at a large organization. For people to know where to go to find things and to know where those primary places to go are that are like the big resource hubs is really crucial. We had a new hire just recently, and the first thing I told him was, hey, this website is great for anything you need for medical affairs. You can go here and pretty much everything that you need is there. It's just so important. And then later on, I'll reinforce that and walk him through the website. But yeah, I think that's very important. As for doing things for them, I would definitely steer clear of that as much as I can personally.
Got it. Is it different
And
in
I
a
think
smaller organization, Michael?
it's exactly where I was going. I think it is. I am often very willing for myself and my team to do something because I don't have the scale concerns of a Bayer, right? I don't need to worry about if I deliver something that an MSL could get for themselves, as simple as a password reset on Viva CRM, right? I don't have to worry about scaling that. If 6 MSLs or 12 MSLs ask me for that, I can manage that. If 600 do it, I can't manage that. So I don't know. I have the luxury of not worrying about that scale. Something I think about is always at least demonstrating that the entire excellence team can do something, even if they teach other stakeholders how to do something. Otherwise, it's just the operations team getting back to our earlier point. Here's how you do it, but you do it. We don't do that. That's just project management by giving orders. And that doesn't come off very well. The most effective project managers are the ones, I think, to talk about one particular role in a comprehensive medical excellence framework. One thing project managers do very well is take a lot of the tasks off the plates of those whose time is better spent strategic, particularly medical directors. And that's how we focus that role. We tell them the more you can do, the better, but we also limit their support to one or two medical directors, depending on the breadth of activity, to make sure that won't overwhelm.
So that's a great transition. So, I mean, it will obviously depend on what you choose to offer, but let's just take your specific examples. Michael, maybe you first. In a smaller organization, how is your team structured? What key roles do you need? How do you align by therapeutic area or function? Like, just walk us through what your team looks like.
Happily, and I'll do it at a particular point in time, which is a few years ago, when Spark's Medical Affairs Group was bigger than it is now, and was working across 3 different therapeutic areas. We had, at our largest, 3 project managers, one for each therapeutic area, essentially aligned with a medical director and the field medical director for that therapeutic area. That field medical leader encompassed all of the MSLs across different therapeutic areas that might differ across organizations. So project management, which is a very time intensive, particularly in our environment, a time intensive role, because as I said, they're the ones that are actually executing tasks. We can multiply that and justify having one for every therapeutic area. But across the excellence department, we found it helpful to have one finance and contracts person, one medical legal regulatory review coordinator for medical materials. They worked very closely with commercial operations, so there was a natural cross communication there. And those 2 team members, it was really important to me to make sure that there was good fit and chemistry between those 2 team members. And so when I had to fill my role, I made sure that the commercial operations colleague was on the interview panel, because these 2 people back each other up. Viva Vault, same back system, whether it's PromoMats or medical.
Yeah.
Somebody goes on vacation for a week, your MLR can't stop, right? So we had, to get back to the question, one medical legal review coordinator across therapeutic areas. We had library services as well. I think that covers it. But definitely project management, I think, is therapeutic area specific, whereas the others were more general. And the project managers were primarily also supporting field medical.
Got it. And then how is that different for you, Chris? Because in such a big matrixed organization, it's got to look a little bit different.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like Michael's got people who with very specific skill sets that are really laser focused on that. We certainly recognize the need to have folks with a variety of experience on the medical excellence team. So we explicitly chose people from different therapeutic areas with different backgrounds, people with people management experience, people without people management experience who were straight out of MSL roles. And I think that has benefited us on the whole, because everybody comes with a little bit of a different hat, a little bit of a different background and perspective that they can bring to bear. The way that we approached it was that we, in order to prevent us from feeling like we were too disengaged from the field, each one of us aligned with one of the therapeutic area teams or one of the regional teams, so that somebody was there in the room during all their team meetings, and that we really knew what was on the minds of the MSLs, what their pain points really were, so that, again, that would inform our prioritization of our products or projects, excuse me. So the other thing is that it's not only important to figure out who's going to be on your MedX team, but also in a big matrix organization, like you said, Scott, to find the people in the organization who can help you reach your goals. Because there are sometimes I have found more people than I even knew existed, because it's just such a large organization. And finding these people, making contact, has been a crucial part of bringing any work stream to fruition, and a key piece of our success.
So, so let me ask, just the in as you got larger and you had more initiatives and you're deploying them across multiple frameworks or multiple groups, eh, how do you balance like one person being able to know six, seven, eight, nine different processes, and I'm responsible for all of those for the US or for Europe or for this TA or that TA? I mean, it seems very complex.
I'm not sure you can have one person that know all of that. It would be very rare to have somebody who's worked in, especially in a large organization, every TA and every role, and to have had direct experience with that. That's exceedingly rare and probably not something anyone should count on. If you have a superhuman like that, great. But if not, uh, and you live in the real world like the rest of us, then we've got to understand that we bring some experience to bear, but it's not going to be universal. So the solution to that in my mind is, again, when you're in the planning stage of a given new resource or a new product, you involve as many people around the organization as
Mm.
possible to contribute that. And that's why I think that the MedX folks are often the silo breakers and the organizers and bringing people together who wouldn't normally talk to each other. Uh, that's something that's really crucial.
Yeah, I guess heroism isn't a strategy.
Well, it's a strategy. It's just very difficult to execute. It takes a while
Like,
to hire the right people. I'm joking, of course, but the so when it comes to team leadership of an excellence team, this is where effective agenda setting and encouraging information sharing among people with similar roles but serving different stakeholders can
Hmm.
really help. Um, if I want to talk about an advisory board process, I might have one project manager walk through the process, but then I want to foster a dialogue among the project managers and the others about, well, we do it this way, well, we do it that way. So they see that there are maybe up to 6 or 9 different ways to do something. They
Mm.
might pick something up that's better for their process. If they need to cover somebody or eventually move the role over, they understand that there's flexibility. So that's when convening an excellence team meeting and getting team members to learn from and teach one another and cover for one another and build that kind of culture can be really important. I learned that in my first industry job as a publications manager, and we had several different publication managers across different therapeutic areas, and I was really green. And I walked into the meeting room going, "Why do we need to talk about the manuscript process? Shouldn't we all just have this internalized?" And how wrong I was. Now we all had it internalized, but we all had a different one internalized, and that wasn't the world's worst thing. And I came
Right.
out of that meeting much younger, very significantly disillusioned in a good way.
Gotcha. So let me ask, in order for medical excellence professionals to remain the advisor, the trusted advisor for the teams that they support, they need to be learning almost twice as fast as the people that they're supporting, or else they won't be needed, right? So how do you do that with your teams? Like, how do you help create this momentum where they're implementing one thing but they're still learning to stay ahead?
I can start with that. I directly, I incentivize it. I make it part of their development plan and I make it part of their performance. I measure it. I think that's really critically important. And I also like to see milestones of demonstrating that learning at different team meetings of different groups of people and showing those milestones. Again, continuing to show to others that, look, operations is learning twice
Mhm.
as fast. Here's how we can deliver value to your stakeholders and to you directly.
Awesome. Um, So let's just talk for maybe a moment around communicating uh, medical excellence, right? And kind of the branding and like, what are some of the like very tactical things that you do to make sure people understand both the function and the programs that you have for people?
Can I start with a quick story on this?
Love it.
So, when we first decided to recreate this medical excellence group, you get a bunch of questions. Well, what does that mean? What are you guys actually going to do? What projects are you going to work on? And when, I'm still interviewing for the roles, I don't even know if I really have it, but people start asking questions, right? And uh, I didn't have my elevator pitch developed yet because I wasn't even sure whether I was going to hop into this role. And what ended up coming out of my mouth, a colleague ended up telling me, well, that sounds like what I do. And then obviously I did a terrible job of explaining what I'm doing because the medical excellence role was nothing like what this other person was
Oh,
doing. So it is really critical to get your spiel together so that people do understand what you're doing. And so once the team was assembled, we sat down and developed an elevator pitch. We really wanted to be sure that everybody did know what we were doing and what we weren't doing. And we took a long time to really define that. But one really easy example for you is that on paper, within HR, my role, I don't even know what it is anymore because it's like 6 or 7 words long. And everybody that I said it to said, what? Can you say that again? It was incomprehensible to them. It was not intuitive. Nobody knew what it meant. And so we decided that I put together a whole long list of potential titles that we could just call ourselves.
hmm.
And we landed on Director of Medical Excellence, and we call ourselves the DMXs. Everybody knows us as the DMXs now. And it was just an easier name that rolled off of everybody's tongue and allowed them to talk about us without getting tongue tied and confused. So
Love it.
tried to simplify for everybody.
Do you mind sharing what that elevator pitch was?
I don't remember off the top of my head right now,
You got
but
it.
it essentially boiled down to our role is here to help the MSLs maximize their impact. That could look like a variety of different things. And um, yeah, something along those lines. But it really comes down to making sure that the MSLs are maximizing their impact.
Fantastic. Michael, in your organization, right, you're working with maybe a broader set of stakeholders because it's not just field. How do you communicate? Like, I'm working with medical directors and SciComm and meta field, and like, how do you summarize that for people?
So, in listening to Chris's answer, I'm having definitely a woulda, coulda, shoulda moment here. In that, uh, when I saw the need for operations, when I saw what wasn't getting done, and what I was fielding the complaints about what wasn't getting done, and I was in a medical communications role, so I wasn't directly responsible for it. I didn't think to brand it effectively, and I regret that because I missed an opportunity to do what Chris talked about, which is really craft an elevator pitch and really list out the names, the titles, what's really going to resonate with people, and think about what's on the receiving end. I was very focused on solving the problems that I
Mm,
heard, and I solved them potentially at the expense of some long-term growth opportunities for the group. Okay, so be it. That's okay, but we were small enough at the time that all I had to do was hold one-on-one meetings with all the stakeholders, and there weren't too many of them. We weren't huge
right.
to hold those one-on-one stakeholder meetings and say, I'm thinking about adding this role and developing this small department, and here's how it's going to help you. And there was, so it was a very customized elevator speech. I did that on
Yeah.
a one-to-one basis. And so it resonated with everybody. As the company grew, as medical affairs grew, then operations grew with it. And it was just an expected part of the organic growth. So I didn't have to concern myself with branding it. And I regret it because it was, in essence, a missed opportunity. I now have my elevator speech,
Yeah.
particularly for colleagues outside medical. And like Chris's, it's all about enabling others to do their best work and removing roadblocks.
Love it. Thanks for sharing maybe one of the things that you would have done differently. Chris, what is something that you might have done differently, a lesson learned as you built out the medical excellence function?
Man, um, probably a lot. So that I do think that branding is really critical. We probably should have done that earlier, exactly to Michael's point, because if you don't do that early and get the message out to everybody, there's a vacuum that's created, and a lot of incorrect assumptions will creep in and start to spread. So you don't want that. You want to get ahead of that and make sure that everybody understands what you're doing, so that you don't have to beat that away uh, later on. We should probably also, as I alluded to earlier, be reevaluating our priority list a little bit more
Mm,
often. Once you get focused on stuff, you get attached to it, and then you dig further and further in, and you start to think that's your only job. But MedX can be so broad that it's worth every now and again pausing and saying, "Hey, what should we really be focusing on right now?" And we're just coming around to another cycle where we're going to be doing that very soon here.
love that. Um, so let's turn to the future. Maybe can be where we close out. As you see medical affairs evolving, what do you see changing about medical excellence? What do we need to focus on? What do we need to provide that we're not doing today in order to help medical affairs maintain its purpose and achieve the impact that it's after?
I think we'll be continuously adapting and evolving. That requires vision to know where medical affairs is going. If I look at medical affairs now and just look briefly in the rearview mirror, max 10, 15 years ago, with organizations like MAPS that have really helped medical affairs leaders grow their skill set and become more impactful in their organizations, medical excellence has started to respond to that and really not only assist with that, but help leaders drive that. And I think that the number of operations and excellence professionals that you see at MAPS now is evidence about that. So that's the rear view mirror. So if I turn the camera around and I start to look into the future, to the extent that it's my hope that medical affairs generally will become more integrated into the strategy, into the planning of the overall enterprise, and much less siloed, then medical affairs excellence maybe partners with commercial operations or commercial excellence, regulatory operations. Those functions are conceptually doing some of the same things, but with different tactics in mind. But I think there's potential value to be had in coordinating the operations of those functions the way the leaders of those functions are working together at higher levels.
Chris, what do you?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think that there's already a growing understanding of the importance of medical affairs. That's been growing for some years now, and that trend seems to only be continuing. So I think that medical affairs is probably going to be understood in the future as more of an integral puzzle piece rather than a separate puzzle that's just kind of off to the
Mm,
side. If we're going with metaphors here,
we
I
are.
think that everybody is starting to understand why medical affairs is so crucial, and uh, we're going to continue down that path. Medical excellence is going to help articulate even further why we are a crucial puzzle piece and to be able to demonstrate that.
I love that. I love that. We are seeing, and we heard it at MAPS, this transition from medical affairs was invented as a reactive function to answer questions, and now we have proactive purpose of changing beliefs in the medical community to help improve patient care. And we went from a very siloed organization towards something that's much more connected and integrated as part of a holistic organization that can bring value to the medical community and to patients. And I love that's where you see us continuing to move forward because it's inspiring and it's exciting and it's hard.
For sure. None of this is easy work. And it's difficult to measure, which means it's difficult to tell the story. but you keep at it and you persist. And you just look back 10 years ago and look how far we've come. And so I think that forward-looking, futuristic vision as to what medical affairs and what medical affairs excellence can be is worth the time. So I think it's a great question.
Wonderful. Well, guys, this has been a very engaging hour. It just flew by for me. Hopefully, it did for you. And I just want to tell everybody who's listening, both of you are so generous with your time and your expertise and access to you, whether it's doing a podcast like this, your involvement at MAPS, and your interest in sharing. I'm sure if people reached out through LinkedIn, if they had questions, that it'd be a good way to reach you. So I'll put that in the show notes, guys. Thank you. This was fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to continuing these conversations, whether it's online or over dinner or whenever I can see you. So thank you again, and keep on going.
Absolutely.
you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Chris.